Have you ever just stopped and really thought about how many decisions we make every single day?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's kind of crazy, right?
Totally.
I
Yeah.
mean, from tiny little things like, oh, what to have for breakfast to huge life choices.
Mhm.
It's constant. And with the internet and everything, there's just so much information all the time.
Yeah.
It can be really overwhelming, right? Like, how are you supposed to make good choices without your head exploding?
You got to find a way to cut through all the noise, that's for sure.
That's exactly what we're trying to do here on the Depth Dive.
Yep.
We take a deep breath, we dive into a mountain of information,
Right.
and then we pull out the most interesting and useful bits just for you.
Exactly. So you can feel like you really understand something without having to read like a million articles.
It's like a shortcut to knowledge.
Exactly.
Today, we're talking about something that might surprise you.
Oh,
It's computer science.
okay.
Who knew, right?
Yeah.
But seriously, there are all these principles from computer science that can actually help us solve everyday problems in really practical ways.
Wow, absolutely.
Our main source for this deep dive is the book Algorithms to Live by Brian Christian and Tom Griffiths.
It's a great book. I mean, I think a lot of people hear algorithms and their eyes glaze over.
Yeah.
But it's really about logic and problem solving.
Oh,
These are ideas anyone can use.
totally. So get ready, because I think you're going to have some serious aha
Yeah.
moments.
Oh, yeah, me too.
Okay, let's start with a situation I think everyone has experienced.
Okay.
Imagine you're trying to find an apartment.
Oh, stressful.
Super stressful, especially in a crazy market like, say, San Francisco.
Oh, yeah. Good luck with that.
You see a place that seems pretty decent, but that little voice in your head is like, what if there's something even better out there?
Oof, I know that voice.
Right. And you have to make a decision quickly because places go so fast.
Mm-hmm.
How do you know when to stop looking and just take the plunge?
It's tough, right? You want to make sure you're not settling, but you also don't want to miss out on something good by waiting too long.
Right. And that's actually a classic problem in computer science called the secretary problem.
Is that really what it's called?
It is. So picture yourself as a hiring manager.
Okay.
You're interviewing candidates one after another.
Okay.
After each interview, you have to decide right then and there.
Oh my gosh, pressure.
Right. Hire or no hire. And if you say no, you can't go back.
Wow.
The challenge is figuring out how to maximize your chances of finding the absolute best candidate in that pool of applicants.
Right. How do you know when to stop looking?
Exactly. It's about figuring out when to switch from exploring the options to committing to one.
Yeah. I mean, how do you even begin to approach that problem?
Well, the first thing to realize is that even with the absolute best strategy,
Mm-hmm.
you're still probably going to miss out on the very best candidate about 63% of the time.
Really?
It's a little depressing, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a lot.
Because you can't see the future. You never know if the next candidate is going to be the superstar.
So you're saying there's always an element of luck involved.
Absolutely. But don't worry, there's a way to improve your odds significantly.
Oh, good.
It's called the 37% rule.
The 37% rule.
Yes. The idea is that you should spend the first 37% of your search just looking, gathering information without making any commitments.
Okay.
So, for example, if you have a month to find an apartment,
Okay.
you'd spend about the first 11 days just looking at places, getting a feel for the market, setting your expectations.
Okay.
Then, after that 37% mark,
Yeah.
you go for the very next option that is better than anything you've seen before.
Oh, interesting.
So it's like you're using that initial period to calibrate your sense of what's out there.
Right. So you have something to compare to.
Exactly. You're basically saying, okay, I've seen enough to have a decent benchmark.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm ready to commit when something that beats that benchmark comes along.
Okay, that makes sense. But why 37%? Isn't that kind of a weird number?
It seems random, but there's actually some pretty cool math behind it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It turns out that 37% is roughly equal to 1 divided by e, which is this special number in math, like pi.
Okay.
And without getting too deep into the weeds,
Please don't.
that number just happens to be the sweet spot for balancing the risk of stopping too early
Mm-hmm.
with the risk of waiting so long that you miss out on all the good stuff.
Okay.
And what's even cooler
Yeah.
is that this 37% rule applies no matter how many options you have.
Oh, wow.
Whether you're interviewing 10 candidates or 100 candidates,
Right.
spending that initial 37% of the time just looking gives you the best statistical odds of finding the top choice.
Wow. So even if I had like a million options, that rule still holds true.
In theory, yes. It's a powerful tool to combat decision fatigue.
That's amazing.
And this idea isn't just some abstract mathematical concept. It actually has real-world applications like in the world of dating. Yeah. There's this story about this professor, Michael Trick,
Okay.
who was trying to apply the secretary problem to finding a wife.
Wow. That's taking things to a whole new level.
Right. He realized that in dating, you don't know how many potential partners you'll encounter.
Right. It's not like a fixed pool of applicants.
Exactly. But the 37% rule can still be applied to time instead of just the number of options.
Oh, interesting.
So let's say he figured he'd be actively looking for a wife for about 10 years.
Okay.
According to the 37% rule,
Yeah?
he should have spent the first 3 years and 8 months or so just dating around, getting to know people
Wow.
without trying to settle down.
So like a period of strategic exploration.
Exactly. And then after that, boom, go for the next best thing that comes along.
It's fascinating that you can apply these mathematical principles to something as complex as love.
Right. I mean, obviously, real-life dating is much more nuanced than that.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
There are so many other factors involved.
Yeah.
But it's still a cool illustration of how these ideas can give us a framework for thinking about decisions.
Right. It's not about being a robot and just following the numbers blindly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Speaking of real-world applications, what about something like finding a parking spot in a busy city?
Ugh, the worst.
Right. You're circling around, hoping to find that perfect spot close to your destination.
Yeah.
But every spot you see is taken.
Mm-hmm.
How do you decide when to just take whatever you can get?
Right, because you don't want to end up like a mile away from where you need to be.
Exactly. And it turns out that researchers have actually studied this as an optimal stopping problem.
No way.
I know, it's amazing. They've created mathematical models to figure out the best strategy.
Okay.
And the optimal approach actually depends on things like how full the street is.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah. So if it's a super crowded street with almost all the spots taken, you might actually want to start seriously considering parking further away from your destination, like maybe a quarter mile or so.
Really?
But if there are more spaces available,
Yeah.
you can afford to be a little more picky and wait until you're closer.
Interesting. So it's like the harder it is to find a spot, the earlier you have to be willing to compromise.
Exactly. And of course, this gets even more complicated when you factor in things like competition from other drivers and the possibility of needing to make U-turns.
Oh, yeah, that's the real world.
Right. But the point is that these seemingly everyday decisions can be analyzed through the lens of optimal stopping.
It's fascinating how these ideas can be applied to so many different things.
Totally. Now, we've talked about this theoretical 37% rule, this idea of look, then leap.
Yeah.
But do people actually behave this way in real life?
That's a good question.
Researchers have done experiments to see how people approach these kinds of optimal stopping scenarios.
Okay.
And it turns out that people tend to follow the general look, then leap pattern.
Okay.
But they often leap too early. Yeah. Like, we're kind of impatient decision makers.
Oh, yeah, I could totally see that.
We see something that seems good enough, and we just go for it.
Especially if we're feeling stressed or under pressure.
Right. And so we end up settling more often than we probably should.
Interesting. It's like we're not very good at trusting the process.
Exactly. Now, once we've made a few decisions, we find ourselves in a whole new territory, right?
Okay.
We're constantly facing this tension between exploring new possibilities and exploiting what we already know is good.
The explore-exploit trade-off.
That's the one. It's this fundamental dilemma that comes up in so many areas of life.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like, do you stick with your tried-and-true favorite restaurant? Or try that new place that just opened up down the street?
Exactly. Or do you rewatch your favorite movie?
Mm.
Or take a chance on something completely different?
Right. Or do you go to that same park you always go to?
Yeah.
Or do you try to explore a new part of the city?
It's a constant balancing act.
It is.
Because if you never explore,
Yeah.
you might miss out on something truly amazing.
Totally.
But if you're always exploring,
Yeah.
you never get to enjoy the comfort and the familiarity of things you already know you love.
Right. It's about finding that sweet spot.
Exactly. And here's the key insight. The optimal balance between exploring and exploiting actually depends on your time horizon.
Time horizon.
Yeah, like how much time you have to make decisions in that particular context.
Okay, so if I'm only going to be in the city for like a week,
Yeah.
I should probably just stick with the restaurants I already know I like.
Right. But if you're moving to a new city and you're going to be there for years, You have much more time to explore and discover new favorites.
That makes sense. So it's not just about picking one strategy and sticking with it all the time.
Exactly. Computer scientists often illustrate this concept with the analogy of a multi-armed bandit.
Looks that.
Imagine a row of slot machines.
Okay.
Each machine has a different payout rate, but you don't know what those rates are.
Okay, so it's a gamble.
Totally. You have a limited number of pulls,
Mm-hmm.
and you want to maximize your winnings.
Okay.
Do you keep playing the machine that's paid out the most so far?
Right.
Or do you try the other machines to see if they might be even better?
Right, because you might get lucky with one machine early on, but it could just be a fluke.
Exactly. It's that classic tension between exploiting what seems to be working and exploring to see if there's something even better out there.
So how do you decide which arm to pull?
Well, it depends on your time horizon, right?
Mhm.
If you only have a few pulls left,
Yeah.
you probably want to stick with the machine that's been the most generous so far.
Okay, makes sense.
But if you have a ton of pulls ahead of you,
Yeah.
it makes sense to explore more, to gather more information about the other machines.
Right.
This is what Peter Whittle meant when he said the multi-armed bandit problem embodies in essential form a conflict evident in all human action.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
Now, there are all sorts of fancy algorithms for trying to solve this explore-exploit dilemma,
I bet.
but one key takeaway is this idea of seize the interval.
What does that mean?
It means that the time frame you're working with is absolutely crucial for determining the best strategy.
Okay, I get it. It's not a one-size-fits-all situation.
Exactly. Some situations call for more exploration and others call for more exploitation.
Mm-hmm.
There's this mathematician, Richard Bellman, who came up with an exact solution for situations where you know exactly how many opportunities you'll have.
Oh, wow, an exact solution.
Yeah, he essentially worked backward from the very last opportunity, like a reverse puzzle.
Clever,
It can get pretty complicated, though.
I can imagine.
But the good news is there are simpler strategies out there, too.
Okay, like what?
One approach is called the Gittins Index.
Gittins Index.
Yeah, it's basically a way to assign a value to each option based on its potential future reward.
Okay.
And you always choose the option with the highest Gittins Index.
So it's like a way to rank your options based on their long-term promise.
Exactly. But sometimes figuring out that potential reward can be tricky.
Yeah, especially when you have limited information.
Right. So there are these other algorithms called upper confidence bound algorithms.
Upper confidence bound.
Yeah, it's a mouthful.
It is.
But basically, these algorithms look at the data you have for each option,
Mm-hmm.
and they create a range of plausible values for its true potential.
Okay.
And the upper confidence bound strategy says, okay, choose the option where the top end of that range is the highest.
So you're giving the benefit of the doubt to options that haven't performed well yet, but could still be great.
Exactly. It's a way to balance exploring those less explored options with exploiting the ones that have already shown some promise.
Okay, that makes sense.
So
it's a way to avoid getting stuck in a rut.
right. You don't want to miss out on something amazing just because you were too focused on what was already working okay. And this explore-exploit trade-off isn't just about personal choices here.
Right.
It comes up in all sorts of other contexts like clinical trials.
Oh, right. That's a tough one.
You want to give patients the best possible treatment right now,
Right.
but you also need to explore new treatments to find even better options for future patients.
Yeah, that's a tricky balance. You have the Belmont report talking about the ethics of all that.
Exactly. It's a real ethical dilemma. And so researchers have been developing these things called adaptive trials.
Adaptive trials.
Yeah. In adaptive trials, the treatments that patients receive can actually change during the trial based on the data that's being collected.
Oh, so you're constantly adjusting based on what you're learning.
Exactly. It's like a real-time application of the explore-exploit principle.
That's really cool.
There's even a strategy called the play the winner algorithm.
What's that?
This was proposed by Marvin Zellin, and it's a way to get better treatments to patients faster during the trial.
How does it work?
Basically, if a treatment is successful for a patient, it becomes more likely to be used for the next patient in the trial.
Oh, interesting.
So you're kind of tilting the odds in favor of the treatments that are showing the most promise.
Right. It's like a dynamic system that's constantly learning and adapting.
Exactly. And that brings us to our next computer science concept, sorting.
Okay.
Now, when we think about sorting, we usually think about arranging things in a specific order, right?
Yeah, like alphabetical order or numerical order.
Exactly. But the principles of sorting actually go way beyond just data.
Really?
Yeah. They can help us understand how to manage complexity in all sorts of areas of life.
Like what?
Well, the fundamental insight of sorting theory is this. Scale hurts.
Scale hurts.
Yeah. The more things you have to deal with at once,
Mm-hmm.
the harder it gets to organize them.
Oh, totally.
And the way it gets harder isn't just linear.
What do you mean?
It gets exponentially harder.
Exponentially harder.
Yeah. For example, if you have to sort, like, 10 items, there are a certain number of possible arrangements.
Right.
But if you add just a few more items, the number of possible arrangements explodes.
Oh, wow.
It's like a combinatorial explosion.
Combinatorial explosion. That's a good way to put it.
So the first and most effective strategy for dealing with sorting is simply this.
What's that?
Minimize the number of things you have to sort in the first place.
That makes a lot of sense. So, like, doing your laundry more often?
Exactly.
So you have smaller piles to deal with?
It's actually a computationally sound strategy.
Who knew?
Right. Now, when computer scientists talk about how efficient a sorting method is, they use something called Big O notation.
Okay.
It's a way to describe how the time it takes to sort something increases as the number of items grows.
Okay.
So, for example, ONN means that time increases linearly with the number of items.
Okay.
So if you double the number of items, it takes about twice as long to sort them.
Mm.
But ON2 means that the time increases much faster. It's like the time is squared.
Squared of them.
So if you double the number of items, it takes about 4 times as long to sort them.
Oh, wow. That's a big difference.
Yeah. And this Big O notation applies to all sorts of things, not just sorting.
Okay.
It's a way to describe the complexity of any kind of process.
Interesting. So what are some of the ways that computers, and maybe we can sort things?
Well, one of the simplest sorting methods is called bubble sort.
Bubble sort?
Yeah. It's pretty inefficient, especially for large data sets.
Okay.
Imagine you have a line of people, and you need to arrange them in order of height.
Okay.
Bubble sort would go through the line repeatedly, swapping any 2 adjacent people who are in the wrong order.
Okay.
It's like making tiny corrections over and over again.
I see. So it's like if you have a tall person next to a short person, you swap them.
Exactly. And you keep doing this until everyone is in the right order. But as you can imagine, this can take forever for a large group.
Yeah, sounds pretty tedious.
So there's this other method called merge sort, which is much more efficient.
Merge sort.
Yeah. It uses a divide and conquer strategy.
Divide and conquer.
Imagine sorting a deck of playing cards.
Okay.
Merge sort would split the deck in half, then split those halves in half again, and so on.
Okay.
Until you have individual cards, which are already sorted.
Right.
Then it merges those sorted single card decks together in the correct order.
Okay.
Then it merges those pairs of decks and so on.
I see.
Until you have the whole deck sorted.
So it's like you're breaking the problem down into smaller, easier to manage chunks.
Exactly. And because it's dividing the problem in half repeatedly, it's very efficient.
Okay, that makes sense.
Now, this idea of sorting isn't just limited to things like data and playing cards. It also applies to how we rank and order things in other areas, like sports tournaments.
Oh, interesting.
Think about a single elimination tournament, like in tennis.
Yeah.
The person who wins the tournament is obviously the best player.
Yeah.
But what about determining the second best player?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Lewis Carroll, the guy who wrote Alice in Wonderland,
Wow, okay.
actually pointed out that single elimination tournaments aren't necessarily the fairest way to figure out the second best player.
Why not?
Because the second best player might have been eliminated early on by the eventual champion.
Oh, right. They might never get a chance to play against each other.
Exactly. So there are other types of tournaments, like ladder tournaments.
Ladder tournaments.
Yeah. In a ladder tournament, players can challenge others who are ranked just above them.
Okay.
So it's like a constant process of trying to climb the ladder.
Interesting.
But ladder tournaments can be pretty inefficient, especially if you have a lot of players.
Okay.
It's like the bubble sort of athletics.
Bubble sort, right.
Then there are bracket tournaments like March Madness.
Okay.
Bracket tournaments are more efficient because they have the field in each round.
Right.
So it's like merge sort.
Merge sort for basketball.
Exactly. And the cool thing is that these different tournament formats reflect different goals.
Oh, how so?
Sometimes the goal is just to find the absolute best player or team as quickly as possible. Other times, it's about maintaining excitement and interest throughout the season.
Right.
Like in a regular sports league where you have divisional play and all that.
Yeah.
It's about keeping more teams in contention for longer.
Makes sense. And of course, there's always the element of chance.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Even the best team can have a bad day and get knocked out early.
Totally.
Which is why rankings are never perfect.
Right.
Now, what about in less structured environments, like online poker cash games?
Okay.
There's a formal ranking system there, right?
No.
But the idea of sorting is still relevant.
How's that?
Isaac Haxton, who's a professional poker player,
Okay.
he talks about the importance of self-assessment.
Self-assessment.
Yeah, like being honest with yourself about your own skill level. Because if you consistently play against opponents who are better than you,
Yeah.
you're going to lose money.
Right. So it's like you need to sort yourself into the right level of competition.
Exactly. And this idea of sorting even applies to animal behavior.
Really?
Yeah, like when chickens establish a pecking order.
Oh, right.
The pecking order is basically a way for them to sort themselves hierarchically.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting is that studies have shown that aggression within a group of chickens actually increases
Oh, wow.
as the group size gets bigger
Okay.
until a stable pecking order is established.
Interesting.
So once they figure out who's boss, things calm down.
I see. It's like a way to minimize conflict.
Exactly. Which has implications for how we think about managing livestock.
Right. You don't want to overcrowd them and create unnecessary stress.
Now, you might be thinking, okay, that's great for chickens, but how do I sort things that seem completely different, like different companies?
Yeah. How do you compare apples and oranges?
Right. Well, the key is to have a common benchmark.
A benchmark. Okay.
And in the business world, that benchmark is usually dollar value.
Dollar value. Yeah.
So you can compare companies based on their revenue, their market capitalization, things like that.
Makes sense.
And this kind of financial sorting is really important in places like Silicon Valley.
Oh, yeah. I bet.
There's this saying there, you go to the money doesn't come to you.
Oh, interesting.
And what that means is that there's an established hierarchy based on financial success.
Mm-hmm.
And this hierarchy actually helps to minimize competition and status jockeying.
Oh, so it's like the pecking order for startup.
Exactly. So money acts as a universal sorting mechanism in that context.
Okay, cool.
Now let's move on to our next computer science concept, caching.
Caching.
Yeah. In computer systems, caching is all about making things run faster.
Oh, okay.
It's like having a special storage area
Mm-hmm.
for the information that you use most often.
Oh, right. So it's easily accessible.
Exactly. And this idea of caching is actually really useful for thinking about how we manage our own resources in everyday life.
Really?
Yeah. It's about prioritizing and keeping the things you use most often close at hand.
Okay, that makes sense.
Like, I always keep my favorite coffee mug right on the counter
Mm-hmm.
instead of having to dig through the cupboard every time I want a cup of coffee.
Right, you're caching your coffee mug.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this idea of a memory hierarchy,
Memory hierarchy.
yeah, it's a core concept in computer science.
Okay.
It's the idea that you have different levels of memory.
Hmm.
Some levels are very fast and close to the processor,
Right.
but they're also small.
Okay.
And then you have other levels that are slower and further away,
Mm-hmm.
but they can store much more information.
I see.
So the goal is to keep the most frequently used information in the fastest, most accessible memory.
Okay.
And that's where caching comes in.
Right.
Now, when that fast memory, the cache, gets full, you need a strategy for deciding what to remove to make space for new things.
Well, that makes sense.
This is called an eviction policy.
Eviction policy.
Yeah, like deciding which tenant has to move out to make room for a new one.
Okay. I like that analogy.
And one of the most common and often the best eviction policies is called least recently used, or LRU.
Least recently used.
The idea is that you evict the thing that hasn't been used in the longest time
Okay.
because it's the least likely to be needed again soon.
That's logical.
And this LRU principle isn't just for computers either.
Really?
Yeah, think about the library.
Okay.
When you return a book, it doesn't immediately go back onto the shelves.
Right.
It often goes into a special area for recently returned books.
Oh, yeah. I've seen those.
That's a real-world example of LRU in action.
Oh, I get it.
Because